Thank you, Mr Speaker.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. The Honourable Damien O'Connor.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and indeed it's an honour to be First Speaker for the Opposition in the third reading of this bill. It's the third reading and it's probably the third round of, and I'm not sure, Mr Speaker, that it will be the last round of aquaculture legislation in this House. But I agree with the Minister that the intent of the Select Committee and of the Government and of the Opposition indeed is to facilitate the growth of aquaculture across the country. We at early stages saw the growth particularly in the green lip mussel area. We had salmon farming going quite well. And then we went through a period where there was a rush for space, Mr Speaker. And so we arrived at a situation in Tasman and Golden Bay in particular where there was a gold rush effectively for space on the understanding that it would be valuable in the future and those who controlled the space would control the industry, and a little like quota that the value would be in the space, not necessarily in the production. That created a dilemma that the last Labor government attempted to resolve. Mr Speaker, I was and intend to be after the next election MP for West Coast Tasman, and I guess what I saw was the ratepayers of Tasman District paying a lot of money to try and resolve an issue that was effectively an industry battle. And our government, Mr Speaker, seeing this as a potential dilemma around the country, introduced the previous aquaculture legislation. Now, we didn't get it quite right. It was a very complex task, as the Minister rightfully says about this piece of legislation. We attempted to create AMAs that would have then allowed and facilitated the passage and growth of aquaculture in those areas quite easily. The problem was, Mr Speaker, that we had allocated to regional councils as the community organisations, rightfully elected, in most areas, except of course Canterbury, most areas where local values, local aspirations and local concerns for the environment would be considered along with applications for economic development in the form of aquaculture. We thought regional councils were the right place to park this responsibility. As it turned out, they had neither the expertise nor the inclination, in hindsight of course, to progress the space. And so we saw not a huge amount of growth in aquaculture. It happened to coincide actually with a period of declining demand in the market. And some would say in the industry that it actually allowed the industry a time to mature and not have the gold rush in production that we've seen in other primary industries that effectively led to market collapse of prices. So in some ways, I guess the changes that we made that didn't quite work out the way we hoped have actually allowed the time for the industry to mature. So in making submissions to us on this bill, I think they came with the best of intent. They knew the pitfalls around space, around environmental safeguards and the rest of it, and I hope that we have arrived at a better outcome. There were some concerns that the Labor Party had when the bill was introduced. For example, the Minister's right to override coastal management plans. And as we've seen with the National Government before, they've just overridden the Canterbury Regional Council. So we didn't underestimate the potential for blatant interference by, inappropriate interference by a minister over a coastal management plan that might have been hard won, hard fought and negotiated with all local people. We have recommended some changes. We looked at that, and I think the Select Committee under Mr Shane Ardern's chair, I think he always does a very, very good job. Mr Speaker, I think we've made some adjustments there to make sure that if the Minister does intervene, it is for a good outcome, and that is protecting environmental issues as well as facilitating, I guess, economic growth. Mr Speaker, as I said, I think this is round 3 but we were reminded through the submission process that actually in Tasman and Golden Bay, there is an ongoing, in fact the ongoing, battle between industry players. And that's going to go on for another 3 years. And I'm very, very sad about that because it's a waste of money. If people in the fishing industry, be they fin fish or quota owners or aquaculture developers, if they've got that much money to throw around, then give it back to government for health and education or pay some tax. But if they want to throw it around the court, rather than sit down and negotiate a sensible solution, Mr Speaker, then I guess Parliament will continue to be frustrated by the actions of the fishing industry. The second concern we had was this UAE test, unintended adverse effects, UAE. Mr Speaker, that's been at the heart of the problem here. If I go back to my reference to Tasman and Golden Bay and the crisis in the courts that they had that led to our changes, they remain because those who hold quota believe they have absolute rights, not only to the quota and its quantum, but to space and all the water space in which they can catch their fish. Mr Speaker, I think it goes one step too far, but however, they've got lawyers who are happy to go and challenge it in the court on a regular basis. Mr Speaker, when someone applies for space, they will have to go through an RMA application. They will have to look at all the environmental outcomes of that application, and at the same time, which is the progress we're actually making in this bill, at the same time the applicant can sit down and talk with other industry players, those who have quota, those who have an interest, and in Tasman and Golden Bay it's scallop fishermen who have scallop quota, fin fish, and then of course the applicant that is most likely to be a greenlip mussel proposal. They will sit down alongside the RMA process and hopefully arrive at an agreed solution. That is, that they can mitigate any effects on the quota or on their rights, they can reduce the environmental impacts and allow each other to operate side by side. Now, Mr Speaker, I have absolutely no doubt that that can happen in every single case. Absolutely no doubt. The issues of whether you get to saturation in say, the Marlborough Sounds will be environmental issues dealt with under the RMA system. But the UAE test, that is, fishing industry participants working alongside one another, they should be able to negotiate. And it is pig-headedness, it is arrogance, Mr Speaker, and it's the worst of commercial behaviour that cannot allow them to see the vision and the wisdom of negotiating a sensible solution. It comes down to some corporate, I guess, pride as well, but we hope the changes we've made to the UAE test in here, and I don't want to get bogged down in the detail of it, Mr Speaker, we hope that that has allowed a fair process. We stopped what we thought was a proposal by the industry to have domination by big players. We stopped that. We wound that back a little bit. So all the small quota holders and owners and the fishermen, they will be able to have a fair say in any application, Mr Speaker. So I guess that UAE test, which has been at the heart of the hold-up in the whole of aquaculture development, that will remain the heart of the hold-up if the industry chooses to leave it that way. However, we have allowed through change a sensible solution that will allow coastal management plans developed by regional councils to give some guidelines, individual applicants to apply for resource consent given the environmental guidelines and safeguards, and the UAE test, or the applicant to work through with other industry players and to say we can share this space. This is public domain. We can all benefit from this. And if we've got it right, Mr Speaker, we will see sensible aquaculture development and growth in this country. We need the export earnings. The Labor Party has been happy to work with the government on this, Mr Speaker, and the concerns we had at the bill's introduction have been addressed through the Select Committee process, and therefore the Labor Party is happy to support the bill through into the House.
Call Shane.